On December 1941, the leaflets were posted all over Kyiv. All Jews, not only Kyiv citizens, but also from the suburbs, were to assemble in the Jewish cemetery. At the end of Degtyaryevska Street, we were told to bring warm clothing for 2 weeks and valuable items, gold, silver, diamonds, money, and expensive furs. The Jewish people are very obedient, you understand. We all appeared at 8 o'clock in the morning at Babi Yar, that is, at the area beyond the Jewish cemetery. Babi Yar is what they called it. When we approached the Jewish cemetery, there were boards lying on the ground. We had to step over these boards. I had a sack with me, with dried bread inside. When I crossed over the boards, it was not Germans standing there, it was Ukrainians, Ukrainian nationalists. They were scum. They came to Kyiv with the Germans, yes, from western Ukraine. One of them tore the pillowcase from my hands, the one with the dried bread in it. And at that moment, I saw something terrible, a terrible sight. While I was still standing on the boards, I saw a German tear a small child from the arms of an old Jewish man. The old man, he had already removed his trousers, but he was still in his underwear, you understand. And this German, he tore the baby away and took out a Seitengewehr, that's what it's called in German, a bayonet. He raised his bayonet toward the child. The old man went mad. He threw himself at the German, grabbed him by the throat. Then an officer came up, I don't know his rank, some junior commander, and he struck him in the face. Not because he was defending Jews, you understand, but because he wanted to warn him, what are you doing in front of everyone? The Jews are watching, they'll resist, they won't go forward. So he hit him in the face. When he put that baby on the bayonet, I understood that they were going to kill all of us. I moved forward. The Ukrainian guard said, "Hurry up, move along." I went on. I already understood that behind the barbed wire, past the Jewish cemetery, there would be no way out. Many people had already gathered there. I arrived late in the evening. At first, they were not forcing people to undress. I was still in my clothing. But later, perhaps an hour or two before nightfall, they ordered everyone to remove their clothes completely. A small boy walked up to one of the soldiers and asked, "Uncle, do I need to remove my underclothes too?" He was about 6 years old, maybe younger. He did not understand what was happening. He was simply asking a question like a child normally would. There were about 100, maybe 200 people who had already been forced to stand without clothing, and another group like mine who were still dressed. Then they released around 20 trained dogs. The dogs began to bite at people's legs and arms. People panicked and ran toward the ravine in fear. Young girls, 14 or 16 years old, were crying out, "Why is this happening? We have done nothing wrong." They were driving the crowd closer and closer to the edge. On the opposite side stood 10 or 12 soldiers holding automatic weapons. Right before the drop, there was a narrow ledge. From there, we could not see what was below, but we could hear continuous gunfire. We did not realize what was taking place until we reached the very edge. When I finally looked down, I saw that the ravine was extremely deep, perhaps 45 or 50 meters. At the bottom, I saw a woman lying still, a Jewish woman, and resting on her chest was a very young child, perhaps 1 or 2 years old, still trying to be close to her. The child was alive. The mother was not. When I saw this, after everything I had already witnessed that day, I lost consciousness. How I ended up at the bottom of the ravine, I do not know, but I know that I fell before they could fire at me. I must have lain there for 2 days, maybe 3, maybe 4 days, I don't know, unconscious, beneath the bodies. Then the Germans came down in a group and began to finish off those who were wounded, those who were still moaning. Not everyone was killed by a bullet, you see. Those who were moaning, they shot them. They had a pistol. In Odessa, I had never seen one like it before. A parabellum, it's called, a German pistol. They were shooting all the Jews who were still alive with this weapon. One German stepped on me. He stepped on my body. But I didn't know at that moment whether I was alive or dead. I had just regained consciousness, come to my senses from the loss of consciousness. To suppress the pain, to stop myself from crying out, I bit my own finger. I bit down hard on my finger so I wouldn't scream. The fear was worse than death. I didn't know whether my scream would bring death, so I stayed silent. For 2 days, maybe 3 days after that, I lay under the corpses. There were 2 layers of bodies above me. When I finally climbed out, it was through Petrov-Pavlovskaya Lane toward Kurenevka. I was covered in blood. Not my own blood. Others had been wounded, and their blood had protected me, covered me. The earth didn't bury me. Only after 2, maybe 3 days did I escape. Let me tell you what came before, so you understand. I was living in Kyiv with my family, my parents, my sisters. We were ordinary people. My father worked, my mother kept the house. We had lived in Kyiv for many years. It was our home. When the Germans came in September, we didn't leave. Where would we go? We had heard rumors, yes, but we couldn't believe them. Not really. Not completely. The Germans entered Kyiv on September 19, 1941. The Soviet army had retreated. For the first days, it was almost quiet. Some people thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But then the orders came. Jews were forbidden from this, forbidden from that. We had to wear white armbands with the Star of David. We couldn't go to certain places. We couldn't buy food at certain times. And then came the explosions. The Soviets had left mines in the buildings downtown, the headquarters, the hotels where the German officers stayed. Buildings blew up. The Germans were furious. They blamed the Jews, of course. They always blamed us for everything. On September 28th, the posters appeared everywhere. They were in Russian, in Ukrainian, in German. The announcement said, all Jews of the city of Kyiv and its vicinity are to appear on Monday, September 29, 1941, at 8 a.m. at the corner of Melnikov and Dokhtarievska streets. They are to bring with them documents, money, valuables, warm clothing, etc. Any Jew not carrying out this instruction and found elsewhere will be shot. Any civilian entering apartments evacuated by Jews and stealing property will be shot. We thought, and this is the terrible thing, you understand, we thought they were going to resettle us. That's what we believed. Resettle us to somewhere else, maybe to a labor camp, maybe to a ghetto like in other cities. We knew it would be hard, but we thought we would be together. We thought we would survive. 2 weeks of warm clothing? Why would they tell us to bring warm clothing if they were going to kill us? My mother packed our things carefully. She took our good coats, our warm sweaters. She wrapped bread and put it in a pillowcase. She took my father's watch, her wedding ring, a few other small valuable things. She thought maybe we could use them, trade them for food wherever they were taking us. On the morning of September 29, we walked. Thousands of us. Old people, young people, babies, whole families. Can you imagine? Thousands of people walking together through the streets of Kyiv, carrying their bundles and their suitcases. Some people had carts. Some people carried their elderly parents on their backs. It was strange, this walk. Some people were crying, but some people were talking normally, as if we were going on a journey, as if this was just something we had to do, and then life would continue. I remember seeing neighbors I knew, school friends, people from our synagogue. Everyone was there. Everyone obeyed. The Germans had closed off the streets. There were soldiers directing us, like traffic. This way, this way. The Ukrainian police were there too, with rifles. They shouted at us if we walked too slowly. Faster, faster. But where was the hurry? We were all going to the same place. As we got closer to the Babi Yar area, I began to feel something was wrong. You could feel it in the air. The soldiers were different there, harder, crueler. They were Einsatzgruppen, I learned later. Special units. Their job was killing, only killing. And that's when I saw the boards, the checkpoint where they took our things. That's when I saw what I told you about. The baby on the bayonet, the old man grabbing the German's throat. After they moved us past the barbed wire, we were in an open area, like a field but with fences all around. There was no way out. The Jewish cemetery was on one side, and beyond it, the ravine, Babi Yar itself. It's an old ravine, deep and steep. In better times, people would walk there. Children would play near it. Now it had become our grave. They separated us into groups. They took our documents, our valuables. They wrote things down on papers, as if they were keeping records, as if this was official business. It was all for show, I think now, to keep us calm, to keep us moving forward without panic. The waiting was terrible. Hours passed. More and more Jews kept arriving. The area became crowded. Children were crying. Old people were sitting on the ground, exhausted. Some people were praying. I remember hearing the Shema, people reciting the Shema Yisrael. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then they began to undress us. At first, people didn't want to. A mother would say, "Why must my daughter be naked? She's only a girl." But the Germans would hit them with rifle butts, where the dogs would bark and snap, and people would obey. What choice did we have? There was no privacy, no dignity. Young women, old men, children, everyone standing there with nothing. Some people were shaking, not from cold, but from shame and fear. I saw a woman trying to cover her daughter with her hands. I saw an old rabbi, completely naked, still wearing his yarmulke on his head. He stood there with his eyes closed, his lips moving in prayer. The dogs. I told you about the dogs. 20 German shepherds. They released them to drive us forward toward the edge of the ravine. The dogs were trained to bite, to terrorize. People were screaming, running. In the chaos, families were separated. A mother would lose hold of her child's hand. A husband would be pushed away from his wife. And all the time, the guns were firing. Pop, 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 like it would never stop. Automatic fire. The sound echoed in the ravine, bounced off the walls. It was like thunder that wouldn't end. When they pushed us to the edge, when I reached that edge and looked down, I understood everything. This was not resettlement. This was not a labor camp. This was death, only death, mass death. The ravine was already filling with bodies, layers and layers of bodies, blood running like a river at the bottom. The smell, I can still smell it now, all these years later. The smell of blood and gunpowder and death. The Germans stood on the opposite side with their machine guns. As each group was driven to the edge, they would shoot. The bodies would fall into the ravine. Then the next group. Then the next. Like a factory. Like a machine. They had made murder into a system, into work that they did all day long. That's when I saw the woman and her baby at the bottom of the ravine. The baby was trying to nurse from his mother's body. This image, It broke something inside me. My mind couldn't hold it. That's when I lost consciousness and fell. When I woke up, I don't know how long it was. I was at the bottom of Babi Yar, under the bodies. It was dark. I couldn't see the sky. The weight of the corpses was pressing down on me. I couldn't breathe properly. But I was afraid to move. I was afraid they would hear me. I could hear them above, the Germans, still shooting, still killing. How long did it go on? All day on September 29, all day on September 30, maybe longer. I don't know. Time had no meaning there. At some point, the shooting became less frequent. Then there were just single shots, the finishing shots, the ones I told you about. The Germans coming down with their pistols to shoot anyone who was still alive, still moaning. I held perfectly still. I bit my finger until I tasted blood, my own blood this time. The pain kept me from screaming. I thought, if I make a sound, I'm dead. So I stayed silent under the dead. The weight of the bodies was crushing, but it also saved me. It hid me. It kept me warm, yes, even though they were dead. Even though it was October and getting cold, the bodies kept me warm. Is that not the strangest thing? My people, my fellow Jews, even in death, they protected me. I don't know how many hours or days I lay there. Maybe it was 2 days, maybe 3. I drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes I thought I was dead too. Sometimes I thought I was dreaming, that I would wake up in my bed in Kyiv, and this would all be a nightmare. But then I would smell the blood. I would feel the weight. I would hear the sounds, the crying that was still coming from somewhere in the ravine, the moaning of those who weren't quite dead, and I would know it was real. Finally, when I thought the Germans had gone, when I heard no more shots, I began to try to move, slowly. So slowly, I pushed at the body above me. It was a woman, I think, but I couldn't see her face. I pushed and pushed until I could move my arm, then my other arm. Then I began to dig myself out. It took a long time, hours maybe. My muscles were so weak. My body was covered in blood, not my blood, like I said, but the blood of others. It had soaked into my clothes, dried on my skin. I was sticky with it. When I finally got free of the bodies and could stand up, I was still at the bottom of the ravine. I looked around. Bodies everywhere. Mountains of bodies. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Men, women, children, babies. All dead. Naked. Thrown on top of each other like garbage. Some of the bodies had been covered with earth, but not well. Arms and legs were sticking out. Faces were visible. I recognized some of them. A woman from our building. A man who had a shop near us. Children I had seen playing in the street. I started to climb. The sides of the ravine were steep and covered with blood. I kept slipping, but I climbed. I had to get out. I had to survive. I don't know why. I just knew I had to live. When I reached the top, it was night. The German guards were there, but fewer of them now. They were drinking, talking, laughing. I waited until they turned away, and then I ran. I ran toward the direction of Karenivka, toward the area I knew. I was covered in blood and dirt. I had no papers, no identification. If anyone stopped me, I would be shot immediately, but I ran anyway, through the streets, through the shadows. Once I heard German voices and I hid behind a fence. Once a dog barked and I thought I was finished, but somehow I kept moving. I found a place to hide, an abandoned building, half destroyed from the Soviet mines. I stayed there for days. I had no food, no water. I drank rainwater that collected in a broken pipe. I ate nothing. Eventually, some people found me. I won't say who. It's better not to say, even now. But there were some good people, not Jews, who helped Jews hide. They risked their own lives to help. They gave me clothes, food. They hid me in their home for a while. Later, they helped me get false papers, a new identity. I survived the war this way, hiding, always hiding, moving from place to place, pretending to be someone I wasn't, every day afraid, every day waiting for the knock on the door, for the soldiers to come. But I survived. Out of 33,000 Jews killed at Babi Yar in those 2 days in September 1941, I survived. Why? I don't know. There is no reason. It was chance. It was luck. It was maybe God. Though after Babi Yar, I don't know what I believe about God anymore.
You asked me to tell this story. You asked me to remember. And I tell you, I never forgot. Not for one day, not for 1 hour. Every night when I close my eyes, I see that baby on the bayonet. I see the mother and child at the bottom of the ravine. I see the mountains of bodies. For years after the war, I couldn't speak about it. Who would believe such a thing? 33,000 people killed in 2 days? It sounds impossible. It sounds like a nightmare, like something from hell, not from earth. But it happened. I was there. I saw it. The Soviets, after they came back to Kyiv, they didn't want to talk about it. They said it was Soviet citizens who were killed, not specifically Jews. They built a monument, but it didn't mention Jews. It was like they wanted to erase us even from our own deaths. But I am here. I am alive. And I remember. I remember all of them. I remember my mother, who packed our things so carefully, who thought she was preparing for resettlement. I remember my father, who put on his best coat that morning because he thought we needed to look presentable. I remember my sisters. I remember our neighbors, our friends, our community. All gone, all killed in Babi Yar. This is why I tell this story. Not because I want to, not because it's easy. Every time I speak about it, I live it again. But I must tell it, because if I don't tell it, who will? If I don't speak for those who died, who will remember them? Those babies, those children, those women and men, they have no graves. Their names are not written on stones. They were thrown into a ravine and covered with earth, and that was all. No funeral, no prayers, no dignity. So I speak their names when I can. I tell their stories. I say, these were people. They had lives. They had families. They had dreams. And they were murdered for no reason except that they were Jews. The world must know what happened at Babi Yar. The world must know what human beings are capable of doing to other human beings. Not Germans only. There were Ukrainians there too, helping, collaborating. Not soldiers only. There were ordinary men, police officers, local people who pointed out where Jews were hiding, who helped round us up. Evil is not just one nation. Evil is not just one army. Evil is what happens when people forget that other people are human beings like themselves. Evil is what happens when hatred is allowed to grow, when propaganda turns people into monsters. I am an old man now. I won't live forever, but before I die, I want to say this. Remember us. Remember what happened. Not for revenge. Revenge won't bring back the dead. But remember, so it never happens again. Not to Jews, not to any people. Remember that 33,000 Jews were murdered in 2 days at Babi Yar. Remember that I survived to tell you this story. Remember that I bit my finger to keep from screaming. Remember that a baby tried to nurse from his dead mother. Remember the old man whose grandchild was put on a bayonet. Remember all of them. This is my testimony. This is my witness. This is what I saw, what I lived through, what I carry with me every day of my life.